The Jewish Convert is proud to present our premiere episode of the Study Hall, Beyond Time. Jewish tradition speaks of a yeshiva shel ma'alah, a heavenly study hall, where the sages of every generation are imagined to continue learning together, unbound by the centuries that separated their lives on earth. This program introduces an ongoing series imagining evenings in that timeless study hall. Tonight, 5 sages, Hillel, Rabban Gamliel, Rabbi Akiva, Rashi, and the Baal Shem Tov turn to the first portion of the book of Genesis, Parashat Bereshit, creation, made in his image, free will and sin, and the story of Cain and Abel. Join me now as we enter that mystical place and close your eyes and open your ears and your heart as we join Hillel, Rabban Gamliel, Rabbi Akiva, Rashi, and the Baal Shem Tov.
Is someone here? I feel I am not alone, though I could not say how I know that.
Grandfather, is that? Forgive me. I did not expect to hear your voice in this place, wherever this place is.
My grandson. Then, at least, I am not entirely lost, only confused, in familiar company.
Rabban Gamliel? And can it be Hillel himself? Forgive my forwardness, but I studied your words for 24 years before I ever expected to stand near either of you.
Then you have already done the hard work, young man. Standing near us costs nothing. Sit.
I do not recognize this room. I was, a moment ago, at my table in Troy, in the middle of a difficult line in the book of Bereshit. Now I am here, and I hear names I have only ever read.
Troy's? I do not know this place.
You would not. It has not yet been built in your lifetime. Nor, I suspect, has France, not as I know it.
Ah, now this is a fine trick. 4 sages arguing about geography, and not one of you has asked the only interesting question, why tonight, and why this verse?
And who, may I ask, are you that you arrive laughing at a mystery the rest of us are still trying to name?
A servant of the Master of the universe, same as you, Rabban Gamliel. Only born a good deal later in a small town you have also never heard of. Doing my best to find joy in the same Torah you have spent your life organizing.
5 men, 5 centuries, scattered across nearly 2,000 years, sitting now at one table. Before them, waiting, is the first verse ever written, Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
If I may, I have spent no small portion of my life on this very opening line, and it has never stopped troubling me. Why does the Torah, which is fundamentally a book of law, begin with an account of creation rather than with the first commandment given to Israel?
That is a fair question to put first. What answer did you find, scholar of Troy's?
That it is not, at its heart, a science lesson at all. It is a deed to a house. If the nations of the world ever accuse Israel of stealing the land promised to them, Israel may answer, the whole earth belongs to the one who made it. He made it, and he gave this land to whom he saw fit. The story of creation is the opening argument in a legal claim, not merely a record of physics.
That is precisely the kind of ruling I would expect a court to open with. Establish the authority of the one making the claim before you argue the details of the case.
And yet, Rabban Gamliel, a court does not usually open by describing light and darkness, water and dry land, evening and morning. Rashi is right that the deed matters. But I have always felt something more is being taught in how carefully each day is described. Not merely that the world was made, but how patiently it was built.
Now we are getting somewhere. Rashi gives us the deed. Rabbi Akiva gives us the patience. But I ask you all, why does the very first word Bereshit not simply mean in the beginning, as though beginnings were a fixed point behind us? Read it instead as with a beginning. God created the world using beginning itself as a tool, a raw material, the way a craftsman uses wood or stone. Every single day, in every single life, a person is handed that same raw material again, a fresh beginning to build with if they choose to pick it up.
I confess, friend from the later centuries, that is a teaching I wish I had said myself. Though I will tell you honestly, in my own days, when a would-be convert came to me impatient and mocking, demanding I teach him the whole Torah while he stood on one foot, I did not begin with beginnings, or with deeds, or with light. I told him, that which is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow. That is the whole Torah. The rest is commentary. Go and learn it.
And I have taught in my own time that ve'ahavta lereaka kamoka, love your neighbor as yourself, is a great encompassing principle of the Torah. It seems, Hillel, that we have been circling the same well from different sides of the field.
It is remarkable how often the descendants of the same house find their way back to the same door.
The conversation turns, as it must, to the third verse, the first act of creation described in detail. Vayomer Elokim, Yehi, or Vayehi, or. And God said, let there be light, and there was light.
Here is a curiosity I have never fully resolved to my own satisfaction. The sun and moon are not created until the fourth day. What then is this light of the first day? This light that exists 3 days before there is any sun to produce it.
Our sages already answered you, scholar of Troy, though perhaps you set the answer aside as too strange to build on. They taught that this first light was not the light we see with our eyes today. It was a light by which one could see from one end of the world to the other. And God, foreseeing the corruption that would come in later generations, hid that light away. He stored it for the righteous to be revealed in a future world.
I did record that teaching, in fact, in my own commentary. I did not dismiss it as too strange, only perhaps too large a claim to rest my full weight upon without further support.
With respect, Rashi, some claims are not meant to be leaned on the way one leans on a wall. They are meant to be carried the way one carries a lamp into a room that has no other light in it. I have spent time in rooms very dark indeed at the end of my own life, and I promise you, the teaching that a hidden light waits for the righteous is not decoration. It is provision.
Say more, if you are willing.
Only this, that a man can be shown, even in the worst hour of his life, that the darkness around him is not the whole of the created world. Somewhere, hidden, kept aside, there is a light that was never extinguished. It was only ever hidden. I have found that a very great difference.
That is not so far, Rabbi Akiva, from the responsibility of a court or a Nasi or anyone who leads a community through hard seasons, to remind people that the present darkness is not a verdict on the whole of things. It is only the news of the day.
Rabban Gamliel, I did not expect a president of the Sanhedrin to speak so much like a Hasid.
And I did not expect to be quoted approvingly by a rabbi who, I am told, once taught by playing music and dancing on tables. But here we are.
There is a teaching I have long held, and I offer it here gently, as another way into this same light. Do not separate yourself from the community. Whatever a person understands of that hidden first light, They will understand more of it in the company of others who are also looking for it than they will alone in a locked room, congratulating themselves on their own vision.
Then perhaps that is the answer to my own discomfort. I hesitated to lean on so large a teaching alone at my table with only my own judgment to test it against. Perhaps the teaching was never meant to be tested by one man alone in the first place.
Now you begin to sound like one of us, scholar of Troyes.
I will take that cautiously as a compliment.
The five turn now to the sixth day, the creation of the human being formed, the text says, B'Tselem Elokim, in the image of God.
Of everything I have taught in my life, this is the teaching I return to most. Beloved is the human being, for they were created in the image of God. But greater still is the love shown to them, in that it was made known to them that they were created in that image. The image alone would have been a gift. Being told of it, that is closer to a covenant.
And that teaching, Rabbi Akiva, is precisely why I have always insisted, as head of the court, that a single witness must be warned before capital testimony is given that he holds in his hands not only one life, but, in a sense, an entire world. For whoever destroys a single life is considered by Scripture as though he destroyed an entire world, and whoever sustains a single life as though he sustained an entire world.
A teaching I have long carried near that one myself, though phrased with less legal weight. If a person is not for themselves, who will be for them? And yet, if they are only for themselves, what are they? Every human life is a whole world. Gamliel is right to say so. But a world does not exist only for its own sake. It exists in relation to every other world beside it.
And here is where I would add only this, that the image of God in a person is not a decoration hung upon them once at creation and then left to gather dust. It is a spark alive that must be tended. A Jew's task every single day is to uncover that spark a little further than it was uncovered the day before, in themselves, yes, but also, and just as urgently, in whoever they happen to be standing across from at that moment.
If I may bring us back to the language itself for a moment, the verse says, Na'aseh Adam, let us make man, using the plural. This troubled me a great deal in my own commentary, for it seems on its surface to hand ammunition to those who would claim more than one power in the heavens.
That is not a small concern, Rashi. Words have consequences beyond the study hall. What did you rule?
That the Torah teaches proper conduct here and humility in its very grammar. The Holy One, though capable of creating alone, consulted with the ministering angels before creating the human being. Not because he required their help, but to teach that a great person, even one with authority over a lesser one, should still consult and take counsel with those beneath him, rather than acting alone simply because he is able to.
That is a fine ruling for a teacher of Torah, Rashi. And I would only add, is that not also how a shepherd learns from his flock before he ever learns from his teachers? I did not begin my life with academies. I began it in fields, watching a wiser and slower kind of consultation happen every single day between a shepherd and the animals he was responsible for.
You see, Rabban Gamliel, even the plural of let us make becomes, in this room, a lesson about listening to those with less power than yourself. I begin to suspect that no matter which verse we choose, we will always arrive at the same door Hillel already opened for us.
Then let us test that theory with a harder verse before you all grow too satisfied with yourselves.
The conversation moves to the garden itself, to the tree in its center, the single commandment given to the first human beings, and the choice that follows.
Here, then, is my harder verse. God places a single prohibition before the first man, "Do not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil," and warns that on the day he eats from it, he will surely die. And yet the man does not die that day, not in any plain sense of the word. Rashi, you are the careful reader among us. How do you resolve that?
I understand the day referred to not as a full day of man's later reckoning, but as one day according to the Holy One's own accounting. For it is written elsewhere that 1,000 years are, in his sight, like a single day. Adam did not complete a full 1,000 years of his own life before he died, and so the warning was, in its own terms, entirely kept.
I would add only that a man can die on the very day he sins, and still walk about, eat his bread, raise his children, and be buried decades later by a calendar that has no idea anything was lost. Something in him died the day he ate from that tree, his simple, unbroken nearness to his Creator. The body continued. The rest of the story is only decades spent limping back toward what was lost in a single afternoon.
And yet I have taught throughout my own life that everything is foreseen, and yet freedom of choice is given to every person. If the sin of the garden was already known to the Holy One before the world was even formed, in what sense was it truly a choice at all, and not simply a performance of an outcome already fixed?
I think of it this way, Rabbi Akiva, though I confess the mystery does not fully open even under my own hands. A father may know his child well enough to guess, almost to a certainty, which of two paths that child will choose when offered both. His knowledge does not reach into the child's hand and move it. It only sees, ahead of time, what the child's own heart will decide once it is his turn to decide it.
That is close to how I have explained it myself, in my own words, in my own time. The world is judged with goodness, and yet all depends on the abundance of deeds, of the person's own choosing. For knowledge is not the same hand as the hand that reaches for the fruit.
And this is precisely why our courts, in my own era, take such great care before rendering any capital judgment. We may know a man's character, his history, even at times guess his intentions with painful accuracy. And still the court must wait and weigh and require witnesses and warning before it treats a foreseen outcome as though it had already been proven a chosen one.
And is that not also mercy, dressed as procedure? To insist, even when the outcome seems certain, that the door of choice remains open until the very last possible moment.
Perhaps this is why the text lingers after the sin on the question God puts to the man, Ayeka, where are you? A question the Holy One surely did not need answered for his own sake. He knew precisely where the man was hiding among the trees. The question was extended toward the man so that the man himself might find the opening to answer it, and in the act of answering, begin the long walk back.
Then let it be said plainly, before we move on, the question, "Where are you?" did not end in the garden. It is a question every one of us in this room has been asked more than once in the language of our own century.
From the garden, the sages turn, more heavily now, to the field where Cain rose against his brother Abel.
This is, to me, the harder tragedy of the whole parasha. Harder even than the sin in the garden. Two brothers, the first two children ever born into the world, and already one lifts his hand against the other. I have taught that love your neighbor as yourself is a great principle of the Torah. Here, in the very next generation after Eden, we are shown exactly what the world looks like when that principle is refused.
And it is refused, I think, out of the oldest and smallest of reasons. Cain's own offering was not received as his brother's was, and rather than examine what he might change in himself, he turned his grief outward, toward the one who succeeded where he did not.
which is why the verse that follows troubles me most of all in this section. The voice of your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. The word for blood, damim, is written in the plural. Why plural for a single murdered man?
I understand it to teach that it was not his blood alone, but the blood of all his descendants who would never now be born. Every generation that might have come from him, silenced along with him in that single field. The Torah teaches, through this single plural word, the true weight of a single act of violence. It is never contained to a single victim.
Which returns us, I think, to where we began this evening, to Rabbi Akiva's own teaching. Beloved is the human being, for he is created in the image of God. Cain forgot, standing in that field, that the brother across from him carried that same image. The whole of the tragedy fits inside that single forgetting.
I have paid for that same forgetting in my own community, in my own time, though by a plague rather than a single act of violence. 24,000 of my own students died in a single season, tradition says, because they did not extend to one another the honor that was due. I have often thought of Cain and Abel since, and wondered whether the lesson was ever fully learned by anyone in any generation, including my own students, including, some days, myself.
Then let me say again, in this heavier moment, what I once said, standing on one foot to an impatient stranger, because I do not know a truer thing to say into a field where a brother's blood has been spilled. That which is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow. It is the whole of the Torah. Cain needed only that much, and did not have it in him that day. Every one of us, in every century represented at this table, has stood closer to that field than we would like to admit.
I administered courts my whole life meant to stand between one generation and that exact field, grandfather. I do not know that any of us ever fully succeeds.
Perhaps success was never the promise. Only the obligation to keep trying stood the promise in its place.
The parasha closes as it must with a long unfolding list. The generations from Adam onward, name after name, leading at last to Noah. Our 5 sages, having sat now for a long evening outside of time, turn to that closing list together.
Zeh Sefer Toldot Adam. This is the book of the generations of Adam. I have always found something quietly moving in a Torah willing to spend so many verses simply naming who came from whom, long after the drama of the garden and the field has ended.
As a keeper of genealogies and records myself, I confess I understand that impulse better than most at this table. A community that does not carefully record who came from whom will in time forget that it is a single people at all, bound across distance and hardship by more than shared belief alone.
And yet I would add, Rabban Gamliel, that this list is not only about the past. It ends deliberately on the threshold of Noah. One more beginning, waiting at the edge of the page, for a world about to need saving all over again. The names are not simply a record of what has already happened. They are a bridge built toward whatever will happen next.
Then perhaps that is the truest thing this parasha has taught us tonight. Not one lesson, but the shape of all of them together. A hidden light kept for later. A choice kept open even when the outcome seems certain. A brother's blood crying from ground that has not yet finished listening. And now, a list of names, ending not in closure, but in another beginning.
It is, I think, exactly what I meant long ago when I said the rest is commentary. Go and learn it. Not that there is nothing more to say. You have all said a great deal here tonight, and said it well. But that all of it, every single word, circles back to the same demand. Love the one across from you as you love yourself, and let every beginning you are given be spent in service of that.
I believe I know now how I will finish that difficult line I was working on before I arrived here.
Good, go and write it, scholar of Troyes. Someone in some century you will never see is waiting to read it by a hidden light.
Grandfather, will I see you again?
Whenever this book is opened again, my grandson, in whatever room, in whatever century, we will all of us be sitting somewhere just behind the words. Go and learn it.
5 voices, 18 centuries apart, gathered for one evening around a single opening page. The book remains open. So, tradition holds, does the conversation. We're glad you have chosen to spend your precious time with these wise and revered men studying the most precious of books, and hope you will join them next time as they explore the Parasha of Noach.
This is an entirely imagined conversation. Hillel, Rabban Gamliel, Rabbi Akiva, Rashi, and the Baal Shem Tov lived in different centuries and never met. Every teaching voiced by each character is drawn from or closely modeled on that sage's actual recorded teachings. The connecting conversation, reactions, and relational dynamics between them are fictional and created by this drama. This program is a work of imagination. The 5 historical figures portrayed never met. Their dialogue is a dramatized composition built on their recorded teachings, not verbatim quotation or a claim of an actual meeting. The connecting conversation, reactions, and relational dynamics between them are fictional and created by this drama. This program is a work of imagination. The 5 historical figures portrayed never met. Their dialogue is a dramatized composition built on their recorded teachings, not verbatim quotation or a claim of an actual meeting.